In the grand archives of the Centauri Alliance, there exists a peculiar collection of records that never fails to draw attention. These are the first documented observations of humanity by Xylith Naveen, whose initial skepticism would later transform into a deep fascination with Earth's children. I should know, I am Xylith, and this is my account of how humanity changed everything we thought we knew about life itself. The first time I encountered humans, I dismissed the reports as exaggerations. The claims seemed absurd: beings who could survive in environments that would kill most species, who could heal from injuries that should be fatal, and who possessed strength that defied their frame. But as the lead xenobiologist of the Alliance's First Contact Division, it was my duty to investigate. The human vessel, Horizon's Dawn, arrived at our outpost on Proxima b with little fanfare. What emerged from it, however, would forever change our understanding of biological possibilities. Lieutenant James Russo and Dr. Radhika Patel stood before us, their environmental suits gleaming under our binary suns. They were tall, unsettlingly so, yet moved with a grace that seemed to mock gravity itself. "An honor to meet you, Director Naveen," Russo said, his translator converting his words into the standard galactic frequency. His suit's external sensors pulsed with each word, a technology we would later learn was far more sophisticated than our initial assessments suggested. What fascinated me immediately was their casual disregard for the extreme conditions around us. Proxima b's surface temperature that day was hot enough to melt lead, yet they moved as if taking a pleasant stroll through a garden. Their suits, I would later learn, were not the bulky life support systems we had assumed, but rather lightweight enhancement systems. Humans could survive briefly even without them. During that first meeting, Dr. Patel explained their species' history, and I found myself struggling to accept what I was hearing. Their homeworld, Earth, was what we would classify as a death world, a planet so hostile that it should have prevented the evolution of complex life. Yet not only did they evolve there, but they thrived in conditions that would annihilate most species. "We've adapted to pretty much everything our planet could throw at us," Patel said with what I would come to recognize as characteristic human understatement. "Extreme temperatures, varying gravity, toxic substances, we've learned to handle it all." The data they shared was staggering. Humans could survive temperature ranges that would freeze or boil most species. They could repair damaged tissue at rates that seemed magical, and their endurance? They could literally run their prey to death, continuing long after most predators would collapse from exhaustion. But it was during an unexpected crisis that I truly understood why humans were different. 3 solar cycles into their visit, our outpost's radiation shielding failed. As our staff evacuated to the bunkers, Russo and Patel did something that still haunts my dreams: they volunteered to fix it. "The radiation levels out there would kill you in minutes." I protested, my chromatophores flashing warning colors. Russo simply checked something on his suit's display. "We've got about 40 minutes before permanent damage. Should be enough time." What followed was a display of what humans call improvisation, a concept that would become central to our understanding of their species. Using tools in ways they were never designed for, moving through radiation levels that should have cooked them alive, the 2 humans repaired our shields through sheer determination and what they later called stubborn creativity. They succeeded, of course. Though they spent 2 days in their medical bay afterward, both recovered completely. When I expressed my amazement at their survival, Dr. Patel laughed. This was nothing. You should see what happens when humans really need to solve a problem." That was when I began to understand the true significance of humanity's emergence onto the galactic stage. They weren't just another spacefaring species, they were something entirely new. Evolution had crafted them into beings that not only survived but thrived on challenges that would break other species. The most remarkable thing about humans, I discovered, wasn't their physical capabilities, impressive as those were. It was their mindset. Where other species saw impossible obstacles, humans saw interesting puzzles. Where we saw certain death, they saw acceptable risks. Their very psychology had been shaped by their harsh world into something unique in our experience. As I compiled my initial report for the Alliance Council, I struggled to find words that would convey the importance of what we had discovered. How does one explain to a galaxy of rational beings that we had encountered a species that regularly did the impossible simply because no one had told them they couldn't? "You seem troubled by our presence," Dr. Patel observed one evening, as we watched Proxima's aurora paint the sky in sheets of plasma. "Not troubled," I corrected. "Fascinated. Your species represents a complete rewriting of what we thought possible in terms of biological and social evolution. You should not exist, yet here you are, defying everything we thought we knew about the limits of life." She smiled, a human expression I had learned to read. Maybe that's humanity's real gift to the galaxy. We're living proof that the impossible is just something that hasn't been done yet. Those words would prove prophetic in the years to come, as humanity began to make its mark on galactic society. But even then, I knew we were witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary. The universe had produced many wonders in its vast history, but in humanity, it had outdone itself. The Alliance Council's response to my initial report was predictable: disbelief, followed by concern, followed by a growing recognition that we needed to reevaluate everything we thought we knew about the possibilities of life. Humanity had changed the game, and the galaxy would never be the same. The swarm arrived without warning, their bioorganic ships darkening the skies of Epsilon Eridani's third colony world. I, first observer Crix of the Centauri Alliance, watched in horror as our most advanced defensive systems proved useless against their adaptive biology. That's when I first witnessed how humans wage war. Commander Yuki Ishida of the Earth Defense Force stood on the bridge of the EDF Thunderchild, her expression unervingly calm as she studied the tactical display. The swarm had already consumed 2 outer colonies, their ships growing stronger with each victory as they incorporated defeated technologies into their own biology. "Conventional weapons are ineffective," I reported, my tendrils vibrating with stress. "The swarm adapts too quickly. We need to evacuate while we still can." Ishida's response was not what I expected. She smiled, a human expression that, in this context, sent chills through my neural network. "They adapt to what hurts them," she said. "So let's help them adapt to something interesting." What followed was a display of military innovation that would rewrite our understanding of warfare. The humans had been on our galactic stage for barely 2 solar cycles, yet they approached the problem with a perspective that none of our species, with our millennia of space combat experience, had considered. "The swarm operates like a biological system," Ishida explained to her fleet commanders. "They expect attacks to follow logical patterns because that's how evolution works. But humans? We're really good at being illogical." The plan they devised seemed suicidal. The human fleet, significantly smaller than our own, began what appeared to be a chaotic retreat. Ships fired weapons with deliberately poor accuracy, leaked radiation in seemingly random patterns, and displayed all the hallmarks of a panicked, disorganized force. The swarm, predictably, pursued. Their bioship spread out, adapting and optimizing themselves to counter the perceived threats. Even I thought the humans had lost their minds, until I saw phase 2 of their strategy. Living systems, Ishida had told me, are really good at adapting to survive. But sometimes, being too good at adapting can be a weakness. The scattered human ships suddenly released clouds of what appeared to be simple bacteria, harmless organisms that the swarm immediately began to analyze and adapt to incorporate. But these weren't ordinary bacteria. They were human-engineered life forms designed to do one thing: evolve in a specific way. As the swarm absorbed and adapted to these new organisms, they began to change. Their bioship started developing new structures, exactly as the humans had predicted. The swarm's strength, their ability to rapidly evolve and adapt, became their undoing. "They're optimizing themselves right into a corner," Lieutenant Hassan explained to me as we watched the battle unfold. Every adaptation they make to counter our engineered bacteria pushes them further toward a very specific biological configuration. Within hours, the swarm fleet had transformed. Their ships had developed complex new organic structures to process and utilize what they thought was beneficial bacterial DNA. That's when the humans launched their real attack. The EDF Thunderchild led the charge, its weapons now firing a precisely calibrated frequency of energy that the swarm's new biology was particularly vulnerable to. The bioships, so carefully evolved to incorporate what they thought was an advantage, found themselves perfectly optimized to be destroyed. In nature, there's something called an evolutionary dead end, Ishida told me later, as we watched the cleanup operations. Sometimes a species adapts so perfectly to one situation that they can't handle when that situation changes. We just helped the swarm adapt themselves into extinction. The victory was complete, but it was the method that haunted the nightmares of every strategic analyst in the Alliance. Humans hadn't just defeated an enemy, they had understood its nature so completely that they could predict and manipulate its evolution. They had turned the swarm's greatest strength into a fatal weakness. In the aftermath, I filed my report to the Alliance Council with shaking appendages. How do you explain to a galaxy of rational beings that the newest species on the stage had just demonstrated warfare as an art form? That they approached combat not just as a contest of strength or technology, but as a puzzle to be solved through understanding and manipulation of their enemy's very nature? You seem disturbed by our methods, Commander Ishida noted during our final meeting. Your species fights unlike anything we've ever encountered, I admitted. Not just your tactics, but your entire approach to warfare. You don't just seek to defeat your enemies, you seek to understand them so completely that victory becomes inevitable. She considered this for a moment. On Earth, we have a saying, know your enemy and know yourself, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles. We learned long ago that the strongest warrior isn't always the one with the biggest weapons. Sometimes, it's the one who best understands the nature of both themselves and their opponent. As I watched the human fleet prepare to depart, I couldn't help but wonder what other military innovations this young species would bring to our galaxy. They had been tested in their first major interstellar crisis and had emerged not just victorious, but revolutionary. The swarm had been considered an unstoppable force, an evolutionary marvel that had threatened to consume our entire sector. Yet humans, with their unique perspective and willingness to think beyond conventional military doctrine, had turned the enemy's evolution against itself. It was a lesson the galaxy would not soon forget. Humanity didn't just fight wars, they revolutionized how wars could be fought. The Grand Assembly Hall of New Geneva Station hung in space like a crystalline snowflake, its transparent walls allowing the light of distant stars to paint shadows across the gathered diplomatic corps. Ambassador Riya Patel stood at the podium, her environmental suit's subtle iridescence catching the starlight as she addressed the Galactic Council's emergency session. As Chief Diplomatic Liaison for the Arcturus Collective, I, Scarvier, watched with professional interest. The humans had proven themselves militarily during the swarm crisis, but now they faced a different kind of challenge, convincing a suspicious galaxy that they weren't just another aggressive species waiting to explode across the cosmos. We understand your concerns, Patel was saying, her voice calm despite the hostile undertones rippling through the assembled delegates. Humanity's rapid advancement and biological capabilities may seem threatening. But we've learned from our history. We seek partnership, not dominance. The Mreth delegate's fur bristled. Your species emerged from a death world. Your very biology is designed for combat and survival in conditions that would kill most sentient beings. How can we trust that you won't simply take what you want? I noticed something subtle then, a slight shift in Patel's posture that my years of diplomatic training recognized as significant. She wasn't defensive, she was anticipating this. Precisely because we emerged from a death world, she replied, we understand the value of cooperation. On Earth, those who fought alone died alone. Those who learned to work together, to build communities and share resources, survived and thrived. It's literally written into our DNA. The exchange continued, but my attention was drawn to unusual patterns in the station's quantum communication network. As a member of a species that could perceive quantum fluctuations naturally, I noticed irregularities that others might miss. Someone was transmitting encoded data packets during the diplomatic session. After the assembly adjourned, I approached Ambassador Patel in one of the station's private gardens, a neutral space designed to accommodate multiple species' atmospheric needs. An impressive defense of your species, Ambassador, I said, my crystalline form refracting the artificial sunlight. Though I suspect you were expecting those particular accusations. Her smile confirmed my suspicion. Just as I suspect you noticed the unauthorized transmissions during my speech, Liaison Scarvier. This direct acknowledgement startled me. Humans were proving to be far more perceptive than anyone had anticipated. There are factions, she continued, her voice lowering, that would prefer humanity remain isolated. They've seen what we can do, and they're afraid. But I think you and I both know there's something larger at play. She was right. The patterns I detected suggested coordination between multiple species that historically were often in conflict with each other. Their sudden cooperation was troubling. Over the next several weeks, Patel and I worked together, combining her species' intuitive problem-solving with my quantum-sensitive abilities. We uncovered a complex web of conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of multiple governments. The opposition to human integration wasn't just about fear, it was about power. They're weaponizing prejudice, Patel explained during one of our secure meetings. Using the galaxy's natural fear of different species to maintain their control over key technologies and trade routes. Humanity's emergence threatens that control because we've demonstrated we can replicate and often improve upon technologies that some species have monopolized for centuries. The conspiracy ran deeper than either of us had imagined. We discovered evidence of sabotaged first contact scenarios, manipulated cultural exchanges, and even attempts to provoke military incidents that could be blamed on human aggression. But what our opponents hadn't counted on was humanity's greatest strength, not their physical capabilities or their technological innovations, but their ability to form genuine connections across species barriers. Your kind has a remarkable capacity for empathy, I told Patel one cycle as we reviewed evidence. Even without natural quantum sensitivity or telepathic abilities, you seem to understand other species on a fundamental level. We had to, she replied. On Earth, survival often depended on understanding not just other humans, but other species, predators, prey, symbiotic partners. We learned to read body language, to interpret intentions, to connect with beings very different from ourselves. This ability proved crucial as we built a coalition of species willing to stand against the conspiracy. Humans didn't just present evidence, they helped each species understand how cooperation would benefit them specifically, adapting their approach for different cultural frameworks and value systems. The culmination came during a second emergency session of the Council. This time, when Ambassador Patel took the podium, she wasn't alone. Representatives from 27 species stood with her, each prepared to testify about the manipulation they'd uncovered and the benefits they'd already seen from genuine cooperation with humanity. We didn't evolve to conquer, Patel declared to the assembled delegates. We evolved to adapt, to understand, to connect. Yes, we can fight when we must, but we prefer to build bridges rather than walls. The question isn't whether you can trust humans. The question is, can you trust those who have been working so hard to keep us apart? The evidence we presented was irrefutable. The conspiracy began to unravel as more species came forward, revealing how they'd been manipulated and controlled. But perhaps more importantly, humanity had demonstrated another kind of strength, the power to unite diverse species toward a common goal. In my final report to the Arcturus Collective, I wrote, humanity's true power lies not in their physical capabilities or their technological innovations, but in their unique ability to serve as a catalyst for cooperation. They don't just survive in adversity, they help others thrive alongside them. In doing so, they may have given our galaxy something it desperately needed, a species that can bridge the gaps between us all. The conspiracy's exposure marked a turning point in galactic politics. Old power structures began to crumble as new alliances formed, based not on fear or control, but on genuine cooperation. And at the center of it all stood humanity, still strange, still sometimes frightening, but now understood to be something the galaxy had never seen before, a species evolved not just to survive, but to help others survive with them. The star Betelgeuse wasn't supposed to die for another 100,000 years. Yet here we were, watching its core destabilize at an impossible rate, threatening not just one civilization but three. Director Naztul of the Orion Emergency Response Coalition, had exhausted every known solution in our database spanning 12,000 years of combined scientific knowledge. That's when the humans arrived. Their ship, the RSS Prometheus, emerged from hyperspace bearing what appeared to be a hodgepodge of equipment strapped to its hull. Leading the mission was Dr. Vikram Kapoor, a stellar engineer whose reputation for unorthodox solutions had spread across 5 sectors. "That's not a ship," my assistant Rekti observed, their optical sensors focusing on the Prometheus. "That's a suicide mission waiting to happen." "Humans," I responded, "have a different definition of impossible than the rest of us." Dr. Kapoor's initial briefing left most of our coalition scientists in various states of shock or disbelief. The humans proposed not just containing the stellar collapse, but redirecting it. They wanted to perform stellar engineering on a scale that had only ever existed in theoretical models. "The star's going to explode anyway," Kapoor explained, gesturing at the holographic model hovering above our conference table. "So instead of fighting that inevitability, we're going to control it." Their plan was audacious. Using modified mining equipment and something they called quantum tethers, they intended to create controlled ruptures in specific portions of the star's outer layers. These ruptures would vent stellar material in calculated directions, essentially turning the dying star into a massive engine. "You want to turn a supergiant star into a propulsion system?" I asked, my crystalline form vibrating with incredulity. "The energy involved would be enough to move the star and its planets to a safe distance from the populated systems." "Yes," Kapoor interrupted. "We've done the math. Several times, actually. It's crazy, but it's crazy that works." The next 3 cycles were a blur of activity. Human engineers worked alongside our specialists, modifying equipment that was never designed to withstand the conditions they planned to subject it to. They called it extreme engineering, taking existing technology and pushing it far beyond its intended limits. "Humans have a saying," Lieutenant Zhao told me as we watched them work. "Necessity is the mother of invention. When something needs to be done, we find a way to do it, whether it should be possible or not." The moment of truth came faster than anyone expected. Betelgeuse's core continued to destabilize, forcing us to accelerate our timeline. I watched from the Coalition's command center as the Prometheus and its support ships moved into position around the dying star. What followed was perhaps the most remarkable display of controlled chaos I've ever witnessed. The humans executed their plan with a precision that seemed to contradict their reputation for recklessness. Every explosion, every quantum tether, every burst of stellar material was calculated and controlled. "It's like conducting an orchestra," Kapoor's voice came through our comms, strained but excited. "Except the musicians are thermonuclear reactions and the instruments are chunks of an exploding star." The operation lasted for 26 hours. We watched in awe as Betelgeuse, a star larger than millions of normal suns combined, began to move. The humans had actually done it, they were steering a stellar giant through space, using its own death throes as propulsion. But the real crisis came when one of the quantum tethers failed. A massive solar flare erupted, heading directly toward the Prometheus. The human ship should have retreated. Any rational species would have abandoned the mission at that point. Instead, they adjusted their position to maintain the quantum network, even as their shields began to fail. "What are you doing?" I demanded over the command channel. "You need to withdraw." "Can't," Kapoor replied, his voice eerily calm. "If we lose the network now, the star's trajectory will destabilize. We'll lose everything we've accomplished. You'll lose your lives. Maybe. But 3 civilizations will survive. Seems like a fair trade." That moment crystallized something fundamental about humans that I had never fully understood before. It wasn't just their ability to survive in hostile conditions, or their knack for impossible solutions. It was their willingness to sacrifice themselves for others, even others who weren't their own species. In the end, they survived, barely. The Prometheus emerged from the stellar storm with half its systems fried and its hull barely intact. But they had succeeded. Betelgeuse was moving along a calculated trajectory that would take it safely away from inhabited space before its final explosion. During the celebration ceremony that followed, I had a chance to speak with Kapoor privately. His environmental suit was still showing signs of radiation damage from the mission. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Why risk everything for species you barely know?" He considered the question for a moment. "Because we could. Because someone needed to. Because humans have a really hard time watching others suffer when we might be able to help." He paused, then added, "And because solving impossible problems is kind of our thing." In my report to the Coalition Council, I wrote, "Humanity's greatest strength may not be their resilience or their innovative thinking, though both are remarkable. Their greatest strength is their inability to accept the suffering of others when they believe they can do something about it. They don't just survive against impossible odds, they help others survive too, even at great cost to themselves." The Betelgeuse incident, as it came to be known, marked another turning point in Galactic Society's view of humanity. They weren't just survivors from a death world, or clever problem solvers, or even diplomatic bridge builders. They were, perhaps, something the galaxy had desperately needed, a species willing to face the impossible not just for themselves, but for anyone who needed help. The void between galaxies was not meant to hold life. Yet here, in the absolute darkness between the Milky Way and Andromeda, we detected something that defied explanation. I, Grand Archon Tlara of the United Species Council, found myself once again turning to humanity for answers. Admiral Kenzo Tanaka stood before the Emergency Council, his holographic form projected from the research vessel Magellan, currently stationed at the edge of known space. The data his team had collected was troubling enough to silence even the most vocal critics of human involvement in galactic affairs. "We're calling them the Void Dancers," Tanaka explained, displaying readings that made several council members' biosignatures fluctuate in distress. "They're not just surviving in intergalactic space, they're thriving there. And they're heading our way." The entities they discovered were unlike anything in our combined histories. They existed as patterns of dark energy, feeding on the fundamental forces that held spacetime together. Every attempt to communicate with them had failed, not because they were hostile, but because they operated on principles so alien that even our most advanced translation matrices couldn't find common ground. "The problem," Dr. Neha Sharma, the Magellan's chief xenophysicist, added, "isn't just that they're coming. It's that their very existence warps the fabric of spacetime. They don't mean to harm us, but their presence in our galaxy would effectively rewrite the laws of physics in ways that would make life as we know it impossible." The council erupted in panic. Suggestions ranged from futile military preparations to mass evacuation plans that would doom billions. That's when humanity showed us, once again, why they were different. "We don't need to fight them," Tanaka said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "And we don't need to run. We need to adapt." The human plan was, characteristically, both brilliant and terrifying. They proposed using the knowledge gained from the Betelgeuse incident to create a network of modified stars, a galactic engineering project that would essentially create a buffer zone where our physics and the void dancers could coexist. It's not about stopping them, Sharma explained. It's about creating a space where both forms of existence can survive. We're not here to fight the impossible, we're here to make it possible. The scale of the project was unprecedented. It would require the cooperation of every spacefaring species, the modification of thousands of star systems, and the development of entirely new branches of science. Most importantly, it would require trust in humanity's crazy ideas, and trust in each other. Your species, I said to Tanaka during a private consultation, seems remarkably unconcerned about changing the fundamental nature of reality. His response was pure human: reality's been changing since the Big Bang. We're just helping it change in a way that lets everyone survive. The project, dubbed Operation Bridge, became the largest cooperative effort in galactic history. Humans worked alongside species they'd only recently met, teaching, learning, and adapting their plans as new challenges arose. Their ability to think beyond conventional solutions proved invaluable as we encountered problem after problem that should have been insurmountable. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sharma discovered that the quantum mechanics governing human consciousness shared certain similarities with the patterns exhibited by the void dancers. Humans, it seemed, had evolved with a unique ability to comprehend and adapt to seemingly incompatible forms of existence. It makes sense, Sharma explained to the council. We evolved on a planet that constantly tried to kill us, surrounded by predators, poisons, and disasters. We had to develop not just physical adaptability, but mental adaptability. The ability to understand and adapt to things that should, by all rights, be impossible to survive. As the buffer zone took shape, something remarkable happened. The void dancers didn't just stop at its edge, they began to communicate. Through the modified spacetime of the buffer zone, and using humans as intermediaries, we established first contact with beings that existed in fundamentally different laws of physics. They're not so different from us, Tanaka reported after the first successful communication. They're explorers, seeking to understand the universe. They just happen to understand it in ways that would normally be incompatible with our existence. The resolution wasn't what anyone had expected when we first detected the threat from between the galaxies. Instead of a war, we found a way to coexist. Instead of running, we created something new. And at the center of it all was humanity, the species that had evolved not just to survive the impossible, but to make the impossible survivable for everyone else. In my final address to the United Species Council, I said something that I believe captures the true significance of humanity's role in the galaxy. We once thought humans were an anomaly, a species that should not exist, emerging from a world that should not have produced intelligent life. Now we understand that they are not an accident, but perhaps the universe's answer to its own greatest challenges. They are evolution's children, born to bridge the gaps between the possible and impossible, between different forms of life, between different laws of physics themselves. The success of Operation Bridge marked the beginning of a new era in galactic history. Humanity had proven itself not just as survivors or warriors or diplomats, but as something more fundamental. They were the universe's agents of change, capable of making the impossible possible not just for themselves, but for all life. So what's next? I asked Tanaka and Sharma as we watched the first controlled interaction between normal space and void space through the buffer zone. Sharma smiled, that distinctly human expression that I had learned meant they were already thinking about the next impossible problem to solve. Well, now that we've figured out how to modify the laws of physics in controlled ways, I have some ideas about improving faster-than-light travel. And that, perhaps, is the most remarkable thing about humans. For them, solving one impossible problem just means they're ready to tackle the next one. They don't just survive in a hostile universe, they reshape it, one impossible solution at a time, making it better not just for themselves, but for everyone.